Hello and welcome to this special edition of Mississippi Insight on April 28th. I'm Byron Brown. We are recording this on this Friday outside the state capitol where there's been a very busy week talking about Medicaid expansion. And joining me now is our senior correspondent Richard Lake. And Richard, this has been a week that a lot has been going on with Medicaid expansion up here, going back and forth. Talk more about what this has been about.
Absolutely. It's been a week full of updates, really. You know, on Tuesday, we saw that first public negotiations on Medicaid expansion between House and Senate conferees. And then on Thursday, we saw the House really just get stood up by those Senate conferees, refusing to go to the scheduled negotiations. And now today, we have the Senate compromise. It looks very similar to what the House compromise in that first public meeting. They met the House at the full expansion percentage of providing coverage for individuals who make up to 138% of the federal poverty level. The rest of the compromise is very similar to that House compromise made earlier in the week, and Senate conferees seem very confident about their offer to the House.
Our plan is real similar to the first, where we were covering the folks from 0 up to 100%. And so now we've went ahead and extended up to the 138 percentile work requirement. So it's almost everything that was in our first bill is in this one. So the work requirements are there, the exceptions are still in there. We put a little bit stronger language. If the bill should be, CMS denies it, then the department shall file a lawsuit along with the assistance of the Attorney General.
The House met with us the other day and listed the things, and they met us in the middle on some things, and then we went them back today with this proposal. So I'm hoping it's something that the House finds amenable, and we can make sure that we close the coverage gap in Mississippi and really provide the health care that so many Mississippians need right now.
Can you talk to me about what it took to get, or what changed to get up to 138%?
Well, basically the two plans basically cover the same amount of people. It's how we finance them that are different. And so the Senate went back and we reviewed the financing and listened to the House and to see where we needed to be to reach a compromise. And so we've worked and we've come up with a solution. We think this is a positive solution. We also, it is a solution that is taxpayer neutral. Won't cost taxpayers any extra money the way the Senate has secured the financing. And we know that's really important for taxpayers right now, as everybody kind of feels a financial crunch right now.
The House proposal is a roundabout way that still draws down that 90-10 federal match. The Senate does the same thing. How important was this?
Well, that is something the House felt very strong about, and a lot of our members were concerned about that issue. So we are going back, and we will draw down that 90% match on this new population that we're doing. So.
Talking about the non-negotiable work requirement as
both the Senate and the House proposals both had work requirements in them, and they were both structured differently, but both had work requirements in them. And we heard from our House colleagues that a work requirement was absolutely essential. Those members that have come across and talked to us about this issue. So, and really, we have so many working Mississippians right now that don't have any coverage at all. And this would really close that coverage gap, get those working Mississippians to get health care. And that's what we're really focused on right now.
How does the room feel about budging on hours if it comes down to that?
How does the room feel what?
On budging on work requirement hours if it comes down to that.
I don't think that, really that has not been a discussion. So.
Are y'all concerned about the response to the work requirement at the federal level? At the very least, this would delay any approval from taking place and these people getting the coverage that's offered by the legislation.
Yeah, we feel very confident. Georgia has implemented a work requirement, and our proposals work a little differently than Georgia's because there's been some not great success in how Georgia does it, and so our requirements and some of the things that they have to do in that area have been overburdensome and complicated, and we feel like we have taken some of that overburden and complications out to put forth a work requirement that we think will withstand scrutiny.
Around this building, every single year on the majority of your appropriation bills, there's federal money. We draw down federal money. And that's the bottom line, particularly in Medicaid. Having handled the Medicaid budget for 4 years, that's what we do. The hospitals in this state know that. I'm not sure beneficiaries do, but your providers who rely on Medicaid or who cover patients who are enrolled in Medicaid, they understand that. It's federal dollars, okay? So drawing down that money makes sense as long as we had a preservation of the exchange. We did not want going up to that level and then people going off of what I would consider more beneficial plans going onto the Medicaid rolls. We were not going to do that, and this plan preserves that. And I think the House, based on the conversations that we've had, recognize that. They've acknowledged that, and so that's what that does. And so, in effect, it's two things. It's a public-private partnership. But here's the other thing to understand, is this is a 1115 waiver, okay? Medicaid in your states across the country are done by waivers. It is a way for states to look outside the box and deliver health care to their citizens using Medicaid dollars. It is done in conservative states like Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina. We do it here. We have something called the IDD waiver, the intellectual disabilities. People who have again, intellectual disabilities, through a waiver, we draw down that federal money to assist our citizens. So we're doing that with the working poor. This is a working poor waiver, if you will. And so I think that makes all the sense in the world. It's unique to Mississippi. Part of this was getting the financing right, and I think that's what you see in our plan. And in our discussions, the House, accepted the exchange. So with that, we're able to accept going up to the 138%. But what you also need to understand, well, you may have another question. I can go ahead. Well, there's a certain amount of people we're talking about, okay? And so it's how are we going to cover that a certain amount of people that aren't covered. And the reason they're not covered is because of the system under which we are operating. I'm from the coast, okay? For better or for worse, we have a lot of experience in insurance, okay? And the fact of the matter is, because of the hurricanes and because of the insurance companies, they've continued to raise our policies to the point where it's very unaffordable, or it costs a lot of money to do it. That's what's happening with people who work and make too much money to be on Medicaid, but don't make enough to be able to afford the policies to cover them and their families. And so through doing this plan, we're able to assist the working poor to cover those. If the market would actually provide policies that were affordable, we wouldn't necessarily be here, but that's where we are.
Now the House can either accept this compromise, amend it, or decline it.
Yeah, when we talk about education funding, but also on Medicaid expansion, we talk about those issues. I would talk with Bobby Harrison with Mississippi Today. He gave us more insight on what's going to happen with Medicaid expansion.
I assume the House is going to take that offer from the Senate, but there is one still big sticking point, and that is that the Senate plan appears to still have a work requirement in it, and the House says that won't work. So that's they've agreed to cover people up to 138% of the federal poverty level, which is as high as they can go. That'd be about $20,000 for an individual, $20,000 per year. And now the issue is whether it's going to have a work requirement in it or not.
Let's go back to Tuesday. The House came to the table with a plan. The Senate did not come to a table with a plan.
That's
How
right.
significant was that?
Well, these negotiations, it's kind of a give and take, and I guess from the Senate perspective, they said we're going to listen to see what the House has to offer, and their first offer was take our plan, and that was sort of, I guess you could argue, negotiating from a place of strength from their perspective, but then it was obvious the House was not going to do that. The Senate came close to the House position.
And then on Thursday, the House said we're going to hold this meeting, and then they claimed that the Senate was a no-show, and they kind of put them on the spot there.
Yeah.
It seemed like a game of poker here going on.
Yeah, it's a game of poker. And the Senate, you could argue that when the House had their meeting that the Senate didn't show up at, that was a wager, and then the Senate upped the wager today by giving them a conference report signed by the senators. So this conference report, technically the House could. House conferees could sign it today and be voting on it tomorrow. But I don't think that's going to happen that fast. But after sort of just kind of things moving slowly for a while, things are picking up this week. Of course, they got to pick up this week because we're at the end of the session. So if they don't do it in the next couple of days, it's going to be hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, the session ends next weekend, and
That's
so
correct.
they really have to get things rolling.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to get this far in the weeds, but also, there's in the Constitution it says that the legislature's in session, the governor has 5 days to sign or veto a bill. If they're out of session, he has 15 days. So technically, there's a good chance, unless they act quickly, they could be gone by the time the governor gets this bill to sign it or veto it, and everybody expects the governor to veto it. And if he vetoed it when they were out of session, then they couldn't take up the veto until January of 2025. So wouldn't that be a kick in the pants?
Yeah, do you expect this to be a veto-proof majority in both chambers here?
That's hard to say. The work requirement, the senators, some Senate leadership keeps on saying we can't pass this bill without a work requirement in it, or at least without the 2/3 veto-proof majority. Based on previous votes, it's going to be a lot easier to get that 2/3 majority veto-proof majority in the House and the Senate. It's going to be a close vote, I think, in the Senate to get that 2/3 majority.
A lot of people have been up here advocating for Medicaid expansion. Are the lawmakers feeling the pressure to do that?
I do think that they're feeling the pressure that, it's a powerful argument that, if you provide insurance coverage for people, the federal government will pay 90% of the cost, and then also provide you incentives worth $700 million over 2 years to do that. And so, it's hard to argue with, getting 90% of the cost paid for when 40 other states are doing it. And, there's an argument that our tax dollars are going to those 40 other states to expand Medicaid, but we're not doing it here for our people in Mississippi. So those are powerful arguments, and I think that senators and House members are hearing those arguments. And it's hard to provide a counter argument to that.
Is there a consequence if they don't do it?
That's a good question. I don't know. There's been a lot of pressure put on them from medical providers and others who support Medicaid expansion. Religious groups have been very active in this in recent weeks in the Capitol. But I don't know if they feel the pressure of, if I don't do this, I'm going to get beat, and that's really the pressure that counts.
Also, education funding, a lot done on that, where the House made some changes there.
They did. They made some action on their MAEP Alternative Inspire Act. It was a little bit of a slightly altered version of their MAEP rewrite. The Inspire Act advocates say that this new funding formula could bring roughly $240 million more dollars into Mississippi public schools. And negotiations on this Inspire Act were very fragile earlier this session, and recently the House and Senate have been working very closely on this altered version. It passed the House and now heads to the Senate.
There's been a lot of back and forth with the House and the Senate proposition. The Senate's been real good about trying to give us some good information from their side of it and where they stand. We've done the same thing from our side, but we've generally stood by the House position to go to a weighted formula. As you remember, when we were discussing this before, it was tiered out, had tier 1, 2, and 3. Those tiers are based on special needs children. We also had a English learner part. We had a sparsity part. All of these things were important to make this formula actually work congruently together.
In a statement, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann said, in part, quote, "The Senate's past work on school funding and the compromise proposal we will hopefully pass this year is the next logical step."
All right, well, things are cooling down outside here as the sun is going down, and it's getting a little cool out here, but it was definitely heating up inside, and it's going to be heating up this weekend as the lawmakers are back here tomorrow on a Saturday and on Sunday to work things out with 1 week left in the session. Exactly right, Richard?
Absolutely. Should be fun.
All right, a lot of fun going on here. A lot of things to decide. A Republican advocacy group is giving Mississippi GOP Congressman poor marks for their stance on Ukraine. The group Republicans for Ukraine gives 3rd District Congressman Michael Guest and Mike Ezell of the 4th District grades of F, and the 1st District's Trent Kelly received a D grade. John Conway with Republicans for Ukraine says their updated report card is based on their votes on last week's aid package and related legislation, and their public statements about Ukraine's war against Russia. The aid was held up for months as some House Republicans voiced their opposition and insisted that more be done to secure the U.S. border with Mexico. Now, President Biden signed the latest aid package into law Wednesday. It was a $95 billion package in lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine, just as the nation faces increased attacks for Putin-led forces in Russia.
We had one member, Representative Kelly, his grade changed from a B to a D since the last time we ran this report. The two other Republicans in Mississippi, Representative Ezell and Representative Guest, received Fs. They have always had Fs. So the Mississippi delegation has some work to do in terms of supporting Ukraine against Vladimir Putin's unjust invasion. But we've seen not only in the vote last week on Ukraine aid, but since the war broke out, more and more Republicans are abandoning the core conservative principle of defending democracies at home and abroad. They're abandoning the idea that America needs to be leading in the world. And so as we've seen the Republican Party begin to shift on this issue, we've ramped up our pressure on these lawmakers. We're holding the Mississippi delegation accountable for receiving failing grades. And we're setting the record straight in the state of Mississippi that these representatives do not support American leadership in the world. They do not support our Ukrainian allies, and they're letting Vladimir Putin unjustly invade a democratic country, and he's putting innocent civilians' lives at risk in Ukraine. And it's important that we let the folks in Mississippi know that their representatives are not supporting Ukraine. The Republican Party has fundamentally changed under Donald Trump. The question of America leading the world when it comes to supporting democracies is now a split issue within the Republican Party. Look, Donald Trump has unleashed a wave of isolationism in the Republican Party. It's unimaginable to think that the Republicans in Congress would be split in terms of funding Ukraine, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So the Republican Party has fundamentally changed under Donald Trump. There's a new isolationism that's running through the party. We have seen at the voting level with base voters as well as Republicans in Congress that this has become a 50-50 issue. Mike Johnson deserves a lot of credit for deciding that he was going to fight back against the isolationist wing of his party, folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene, to get this Ukraine funding passed in Congress with the help of Democrats as well. And so the Republican Party has forgotten its core conservative principle, which is that the world is safer when America is leading the world. Look, the United States is spending a small percentage of its overall defense budget to help Ukrainians destroy Vladimir Putin's army. This is a win-win for the United States in terms of our security interests, and it's a moral imperative that we are supporting innocent civilians in Ukraine who are fighting back against Vladimir Putin. And so when we're looking at the future, we have a number of threats on a number of different fronts, China with Taiwan, Iran as well. It's important that the Republican Party understand once again that the world is safer when America is leading the world. And this Ukraine vote and the other number of security bills that were passed last week are a step in the right direction. But in terms of Ukraine, they are still going to be fighting this war for a considerable amount of time. The aid that we have given them right now helps them probably throughout the rest of the year, but they're going to need more funding in 2025. It's incredibly worrying to think that there might be more isolationist Republicans who are in power moving forward. That's bad for the United States, and it's bad for our Democratic allies abroad. The United States defense budget is in the trillions. The money that we're sending to Ukraine is in the billions. It might sound like a lot of money, but this is a small percentage of what the United States spends on our defense to help fund and arm our Ukrainian allies to fight back against Vladimir Putin's army. And we never have to send a soldier to Ukraine to fight back, right? So this is a great deal in terms of the United States security interests, but the arguments that Republicans are making in Congress about why they can't support this bill because, we have issues on the border, we have other issues on the domestic front, is ridiculous. The United States is the most powerful nation in the country. The United States is the most powerful nation in the world. The idea that Republicans in Congress can't pass a border bill and Ukraine funding at the same time is ridiculous. Of course we can. In fact, James Lankford was able to negotiate a bipartisan border bill with the support of Republicans and Democrats. Republicans killed that bill. Donald Trump killed that bill, right? Republicans have nobody to blame but themselves for not being able to secure the border and send aid to Ukraine. Like I said, members in Congress can pass two bills at the same time. They've done it before. They could do it about the border and Ukraine. They had the opportunity to pass a border bill. Republicans killed it, not Democrats. There's no excuse why these Republicans can't be supporting aid to Ukraine right now. I think it's very dangerous for Ukrainian allies if Donald Trump becomes president again. He has unleashed this wave of isolationism within the Republican Party. We need strong conservative leaders and voices on the right to speak up in defense of Ukraine. We need to remember that what it meant to be a Republican always was American leadership in the world. We can't forget that. We need to continue to fight for that. Innocent Ukrainians are dying every single day in Ukraine right now because Vladimir Putin, an authoritarian dictator, decided that he was going to invade the sovereign nation. It's the job of America to continue to support our Ukrainian allies. It's a moral imperative, and it's in the best interest of the United States to be fighting back against one of our biggest adversaries.
That's all for this special edition of Mississippi Insight here at the state capitol. Make sure you stay tuned with WJTV.com. From Richard Lake and the rest of the 12 News team, make it a great weekend.